Hello, good afternoon, everyone here in the room, but also to you, dear online participants. My name is Nicholas Scherer, and I'm leading the policy and advocacy work of the Anticipation Hub, and it's my great pleasure to guide you through today's session. For those of you who don't know the Anticipation Hub, it's a knowledge and exchange platform hosted by the German Red Cross, the IFRC, and the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center. And it's supported by a team of 34 people from across the globe and supported by more than 100 partners from across science, policy, and practice to learn from each other in order to improve and scale up anticipatory action, or as we say, do more anticipatory action, do better anticipatory action, and do it together. And speaking of doing it together, we're very delighted to co-host this event together with the European Commission here in this really beautiful pavilion. Many thanks again for having us here and for also the great collaboration. And we do have a fantastic lineup of speakers today, which I will introduce in due course to unpack a bit more how climate, develop, and humanitarian sectors can work together to create a system-wide shift from responding to disasters to acting ahead of them. The session is basically divided into 4 blocks. First, we will have some introductory remarks from Michael Köhler, the Deputy Director General from DG ECHO, on the importance of the topic to the EU Commission. I will then provide some more technical background on anticipatory action, basically explain a bit more what it is and where we are with the approach on a global level, followed then by our first panel composed of representatives from government and the humanitarian sector, who will share a bit their experiences and takes on institutional enablers, but also barriers to bring anticipatory action to scale. And last but not least, by a second panel composed then more of representatives from the climate and development sector, reflecting on the opportunities, how these sectors can brought together and help us to scale up anticipatory action, looking in particular also at the opportunities that come with the loss and damage fund and loss and damage funding arrangement. And yeah, with these brief remarks, I'd like to invite Professor Michael Köhler, Deputy Director General of the DG ECHO, to provide his welcome remarks. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Thank you to all of you for being here and our colleagues online. I would like to return the compliment, thanking the Anticipation Hub for doing this together with us, the Red Cross and the other partners. And I wanted to also have at least 2 seconds to thank the Emirates presidency and organizer of COP28 for dedicating this day to relief, recovery, and peace, to humanitarian issues, basically, and therefore also to anticipatory action. It's so obvious that climate change has huge humanitarian consequences, but this is the first time where climate conferences take or make space for that and discuss that. And I think we come together really when it comes to mitigation and perhaps even adaptation, and in both resilience building through anticipatory action play an important role. So on the ECHO side and on the European Union side, we try to really make the best of this. Our Commissioner, Janusz Lenarčič, is here in town. He participated today in a number of panels. For example, a panel intitulated Getting Ahead of Disasters, the Charter on Finance for Managing Risks, and another panel on Climate Relief and Recovery in Peace Declarations. Because it's so obvious that we should work together, therefore, I'm happy that anticipatory action plays an ever more important role. The panel here has the title of Scaling It Up. That's very, very good. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. I think it is already a given that anticipatory action is the right way to go, but the question is how to roll it out at a larger scale, how to bring it in good time, how to optimize it, and how to also develop the political will and the necessary energy to get anticipatory action in place in good time before the needs are really there, before disaster strikes. I'm happy we discuss it here. I'm also happy that in the grand bargain, anticipatory action has become part and parcel of our agenda now in the Grand Bargain 3.0, and that's certainly another forum where I try to push this action. Now, we're all specialists here. I don't need to, therefore, justify why climate change has such a big impact on humanitarian needs. Of course, we have increased weather and climate events of an extreme kind. This year alone, or the past 12 months, have shown us some major examples droughts on the one hand, big floods in, for example, Eastern Africa, in Pakistan, in Libya. We had Cyclone Freddy in the Indian Ocean, which was, I think, the longest ever recorded and one of the strongest that we have on the records. We have record-breaking wildfires. We even had floods in Europe in the summer of 2023, in addition to the usual fires. So wherever we go, in whatever continent, we see more natural disasters. And we see them coming regularly. And that, of course, makes it easier to prepare for them if we get our instruments right. Now, you at IFRC, Nicholas, you tell us that soon, well, in the next 20 years or so, we have to reckon with the situation that about 200 million people a year could be in need of humanitarian aid only because of climate-related events. That's a very sizable part of mankind. That's about 2-3% of mankind already, and maybe the figures are even underestimating the risk. We see that the financing gap that we are witnessing and suffering from in humanitarian aid, unfortunately, is going to go bigger because of that. But at the same time, of course, we also know that almost half of the disasters, that's what OCHA says, half of the disasters that we are dealing with are predictable. 20% are highly predictable. And that means we can prepare for them. We can, therefore, not only help more efficiently the victims of those disasters, but we also can cut cost, because anticipatory action is not only more effective, it's also more efficient in the sense of a better use of resources. Now, that means we need to start preparing. Preparing not only our response, but also preparing resilience of local communities in particular. And that is something, so to say, which requires a systemic approach. Now, on that, you work in the Anticipation Hub. In your report, in the global overview that you published last year, you already listed 70 anticipatory action frameworks in 35 countries. And you said there are about 197, to be more precise, that are now under preparation. This shows that there is progress. This shows that we are all working in the right direction. But of course, we need to scale up. And we need to come to a scale that is commensurate with the risk and also with our ability to forecast such disasters. This is something which at the European Commission we want to continue to support. It's not only, so to say, something where we shoot from the hip. This is part of our program. 2 years ago, when we published a new policy paper on humanitarian action, our communication on humanitarian action of 2021, we made it very much made it clear that anticipatory action will be one of the pillars of our action. And I'm very, very happy that Hannah Jans is here, who is our director for this. And she will come in later in the panel and give us a bit more detail on how to do all this. One thing, however, needs to be clear. Humanitarian action is key in this context, but it cannot do the trick alone. We need to have a systemic approach. Resilience building requires that different actors work together, that we have a true nexus between humanitarian aid, community building, climate action, development. But it's also an area where I think we can reap some low-hanging fruits, where therefore it might be easier than in other areas to really materialize, to really realize the nexus. There's a lot of literature about the nexus, there is a lot of talk, there's not yet enough action. I personally believe that disaster prevention, anticipatory action are the low-hanging fruits here. We see already some very good results, and therefore let's scale it up so that if we meet again at COP29, we can share reports about success and not only express the wish to do more. Many thanks, Nicholas.
Many thanks, Michael, also for this perfect introduction, providing the rationale for anticipatory action, also underlining the need and the potential to come together. So what is anticipatory action? To make sure that we're all on the same page when we talk about it, let's have a quick look and watch a little video. If you can launch it, it would be fantastic.
Every year, the frequency and severity of extreme weather events is increasing a lot. We're seeing more severe flooding, longer droughts, stronger storms, and non-weather related problems too. And one of the major reasons these events become disasters is because people are not prepared. Yet, scientific advances have made it possible for us to better predict these events and better prepare vulnerable communities. What if you could know in advance that a typhoon might cause destruction to your home tomorrow? Or that your livestock will be in danger from a big flood that is coming in 5 days? Or that months from now you might not have food to eat because of drought? Well, we do know, and there is a lot that we can do to act ahead of these predictable events. We can evacuate families and livestock, distribute cash to avoid high-interest loans, replenish cereal banks. We call it anticipatory action, and it's here and working right now. Anticipatory action combines prediction with pre-approved action plans and pre-arranged financing to ensure that people can act ahead of disasters and lessen the impact of hazards on their lives and livelihoods. It's a strategy that can save both lives and money. Together with local experts, governments and partners, National Red Cross and Red Crescent societies are using anticipatory action to make humanitarian assistance faster, more efficient, and more dignified. Join us.
Fantastic. Yeah, anticipatory action is not just implemented by the Red Cross and the Red Crescent, but by more than 70 organizations across the globe, including UN agencies, NGOs, like the START network, for instance, but also increasingly also states. I'd now like to give you a bit of an overview where we stand. If we can get up the presentation. So basically in May, the Anticipation Hub, we launched a global overview report that Michael was just referring to, which outlines basically the current status and key development in the field. And I'd like to give you some key top line statistics basically and analysis so that you know where we are. If we can get up the presentation. I mean, as Michael already said, there are basically 70 frameworks, anticipatory action frameworks. Brilliant, thank you. We do have 70 frameworks across the globe in 35 countries today, and this map that you can see here shows the 35 countries in which anticipatory action frameworks exist already. And as you can see from the geographical distribution that most of them, 20 can be found in Africa, followed by 9 in Asia and 6 in Central America and South America. The frameworks today cover 11 different types of hazards, ranging from cold waves over extreme rainfall to rain and river and flood and other hazards. And through these 70 frameworks in place, last year 7.6 million people were better prepared to act ahead of predictable impacts of hazard and able to recover more quickly. And the financing committed through these amounted to 138 million US dollars. So this slide here shows basically the distribution by hazard, and it shows also that most frameworks to date cover drought, flood, followed by tropical storms. And we also wanted to know in the report like who is doing what, which humanitarian organization is covering which hazard, distinguishing by UN agencies, the IFRC, and NGOs. And the figure basically shows that UN agencies have a clear focus on drought, which can also be explained by the specific mandate of FAO and WFP, which are key players here in this field. And where the Red Cross, for instance, focus more on floods and tropical storms. And NGOs, in particular from the START, those organized within the START network, have a bigger focus on drought. You can find all the details in the report. I will also show you a link to download it later. And last year we had 47 activations, and also here you can see the breakdown. It's basically 24 in Africa, 15 in Asia, and 6 in Central America, and also 2 in MENA. So activations basically across the globe. To give you a quick snapshot, through these 47 activations, 3.6 million people were reached, 53.8 million US dollars triggered, and 56 organizations were involved in these activities. So it also shows a bit, I think, that this is a broad movement. Then the report also looks a bit into the future and shows what is under development, and it shows that there are 97 frameworks under development, and basically here in all continents, basically across all the globe. So there's a big momentum currently there, and we will hear a bit more in that in a second. The report also outlines some key developments and trends, basically progress and gaps, and here are some of the key findings. So you can basically see that anticipatory action is a truly global approach. We have over 160 frameworks for different types of hazards currently active or under development. We've also seen significant progress, and we'll hear about it in a second more, on the institutionalization of anticipatory action, especially on the regional level, but also increasingly at the national level. Also greater inter-agency and in-country coordination, and increasing efforts also to expand anticipatory action to other risks and hazards like disease outbreak, which are of course also relevant to the climate crisis. There are gaps as well. We have these frameworks, but we covered only 7.6 million people. That means, in other words, anticipatory action, when we're frank, it hasn't really reached scale. So despite its proven potential, coverage is still fairly low. Also, the available funding is still fairly limited. So we do have a growing interest, but this has not yet translated into sufficient funds to really cover entire countries, for instance. That being said, many of the frameworks are still rather small scale and fragmented, and there are also big difficulties for local actors, local NGOs, local governments to access funding and relevant forecasts that also speak to them. So there's much work ahead. So how do we address them? That is actually now the question we're going to cover in this panel, and we do have a fantastic panel here from the global level, the regional level, the national level. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So we do have Mr. Alexei Castro. He's the Secretary General of the Honduran Red Cross. Welcome. Mr. Joe Carlos Soriano. He's Civil Defense Officer in the DRM Development Standard Division in the Office of Civil Defense in the Philippines. Welcome. We do have online with us Dr. Ahmed Amidou. He's Program Coordinator with IGAD, Disaster Risk Management Program. Ahmed, welcome. And we do have Claudia Herrera. She's Executive Director of the Coordination Center for the Prevention of Natural Disasters in Central America, CEPREDENAC. Welcome. Now, I'll put a question basically to each panelist, but I also want you to engage with our fantastic panelists. So you here in the room, but also you, the online participants. So for that, we do have a Slido, and you will shortly see the event code here on this screen. So basically use this to ask your question or vote for a question that you think is particularly interesting, so that I can post them to the panelists after this first round. Now I would like to start with Mr. Castro. Alexei, you recently, the Honduran Red Cross basically activated recently the Anticipatory Action Framework, the EAP, as we say in the IFRC, on floods. Can you tell us a bit more about the activations, the activities, the lessons you have learned about and the enablers and remaining barriers you foresee?
Thank you for this opportunity to talk about it. The first, please, sorry, my English is terrible. I hope you understand me. And this is the first thing. The second one, I'm not an expert. I'm just going to tell you what we do, what goes in a good way and what not. And the model, the anticipation is not new. We are talking about early warning system, early action, we have a lot of time talking about to act before then. Prevention, mitigation, all those stuff we discussed many years ago. And now we put it on all the elements in the same table and use it. And this time, at least in Honduras, we designed 3 model anticipatory action, in terms of flood, drought, and migration. And we implement 2 of them at this moment. And it's usual. We evacuate people during the disaster. We react, we see the signal, and we react in front of. We evacuate people, we distribute some cash transfer card, we distribute filters, and etc. And do you know what? It's easy. It's easier do it before then rain goes to the, to the chest of the people. It's cheap, and it's easier in general. And the people understand in a better way, and the people cooperate in the best way if you do before then. This is the first big thing. The second one is about the mental health. It's easy for the people. It's easy for every single person. So during the activation of the first EAP, we tried to solve the permanent problem during the disaster or crisis. And after that, we implement the community engagement accountability with a brief interview to ask the people how it goes. And it was very interesting what they tell us in terms of time frame, for example, cost, and resource. Because, for example, we distribute cash transfer, and they use for pharmacy, for combustible, gasoline for the vehicle. These kind of things is very useful for the people. Talking about the barriers, we don't have the common understanding on that. What it means anticipatory action, for what, for who, and this is a big one barrier, The second one is about the eligible cost. Because some donors say, no, because, nothing is happening yet, I cannot pay for it, these kind of things. The budget, of course, always is a limit. And the local mechanism in terms of a legal frame. If nothing is happening, the government cannot to put an alert all the country. So it's not easy to react as a country. As you said, Michael, with a systemic approach, because the legal frame at this moment is not ready for that, for react before then.
The legal frame, okay, so much work needs to be done to set up the right institutional framework. I know that the Philippines are currently working in this. Mr. Soriano Giancarlo, can you tell us a bit more what the Philippines, how they're currently adapting its legal framework and policies to adapt anticipatory action?
Right. Thank you, Nico, for that wonderful discussion that you have. So I just want to put a corroboration to the statements or the manifestations that we have made. Basically, we are having right now quite a similar experience in the ground. But in the case of the Philippines, of course, I would like first to thank Nicolas and, of course, the European Union for having us here. So first, as what you've said earlier, AA is actually not new. It has been in practice specifically, especially in the Philippines. It's already been there for quite some time, and it's very much reflective of the Philippines or our country's proactive stance in disaster risk reduction and management. As you may have known, in 2010, the Philippines have shifted from a paradigm shift of being a reactive disaster risk reduction and management to that of being proactive, addressing the root causes and vulnerabilities to hazard. That's what our primordial focus right now is, to address the underlying causes of hazards. However, as much as we are now practicing anticipatory action in the Philippines, there's this one steep connection between practicing it and embedding this similar concept into our government legal framework. Because now we are talking about scaling up. So how do we scale up first in order for us to have this enabling environment of anticipatory action, for us to have these government actors, our partner INGOs, to have a common platform in practicing anticipatory action or disaster risk reduction in general. No? So how do we scale up? First, I want to focus on the concept of whole of government and whole of society approach. In the Philippines, we have one of the most robust anticipatory action technical working group team. So it is composed of the various INGOs, primarily the members of the Anticipation Hub, as you have mentioned earlier. No? Members of the START Network, the World Food Program, the Oxfam, and other similar INGOs, primarily from the UN allied organizations. So it is a robust AA team that is in charge, really, of institutionalizing or contextualizing the AA in the context of the Philippines. No? Because as you may know, Philippines is one of the most highly vulnerable countries in terms of hazard. As you may know, in the World Risk Index, Philippines is currently #1. Despite all our initiatives, how we have already updated our protocols, reform our policies, still Philippines is #1. No? So it is incumbent upon country with such degree of exposure to really scale up. It's a constant process of aligning our policies, our mechanisms, our interventions to that of the emerging concepts of disaster risk reduction. But right now, in the case of the AA, no, so our policy proposal is that we should develop a policy that would consolidate all AA interventions by different organizations, by different ministries or government agencies, to have this embracing policy or umbrella that would consolidate anticipatory action intervention. No? So we're doing it by way of proposing a legislation, because as you may know, legislation would mandate all government actors as well as the INGOs to have this dedicated platform that would view AA as an integral part of addressing vulnerabilities. You know. So in the Philippines, one of the important outputs, or one of the most important things that our policy proposal would address is #1, funding. No? In the case of the Philippines, the nature of our disaster funding, as much as is clearly stated in our laws and policies, that our disaster risk reduction and management fund would focus from the aspects of disaster risk reduction or disaster prevention and mitigation, disaster preparedness, disaster response, and disaster rehabilitation and recovery. One of the hindering gaps right now as we review it is that disaster funding is only easily accessible post-disaster. Currently in the Philippines, we have a mechanism that is called the Declaration of State of Calamity. And it usually happens, it's usually declared by nature after disaster, after being sufficient, the requirement or the conditions were already been satisfied. Like for example, a certain population have already been affected. A certain area of agriculture have already been affected. The lifelines were already affected. Now, the Philippine government would actually declare a state of calamity that would allow the government to mobilize its resources. However, in the case of anticipatory action, which is actually to address the immediate shocks, disaster funding or the funding for such is not that easily accessible. So as much as our friend here have said that AA has already been in practice, what we need right now is an enabling environment, especially for the local government units as the main or the first line of defense, to have this confidence of doing interventions without them thinking of liabilities in terms of funding. We all know that the Philippines has one of the most tedious government accounting rules and regulations. We cannot easily use funds, we cannot easily disburse funds without first complying with certain statutory requirements. Having this policy would actually tweak how we view or how we spend funding for anticipatory action. So that's one of the most important things that we are uh, doing right now. No.
Okay.
So
Maybe we can back to you because I can back to you in a second. So I can hand over now actually to Ahmed as we
right.
running out of time,
I'm
unfortunately.
sorry. Yeah, definitely.
Maybe, but it's really great to hear also the work that is going on to enable anticipatory action, then also at the local level, at the government level, so that actors have also the legal security to access funds ahead of a disaster. Ahmed, wonderful to have you with us here, at least virtually in Dubai, and I think you're also coming soonish. The IGAD region is also highly affected also by climate impacts such as droughts and floods, and I know that various organizations, institutions are also working or currently building the systems and capacities to enable anticipatory action, and IGPAC is really a key actor in this endeavor. And I know you developed the IGAD roadmap, and it would be great if you could tell us a bit more about the roadmap, the goals and its pillars, and how it will enable or advance anticipatory action in the region. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, and thank you, first of all, for the organizers, including the European Union in their pavilion. Yes, indeed, the East Africa region, I think, as have been mentioned already from the video and also from the Deputy Director, it is a front line of climate crisis, if I may put it that way. We just came out of the longest drought recorded, at least for the last 50 years, just at the beginning of this year. Now, in October, we are in a flooding, extensive flooding, which have already displaced about 1 million people, affecting about 3 million people, in fact. So the region is basically reeling from one climate extremes to the other climate extreme. So I think this is quite important to think about doing things differently. I believe anticipatory action is one of such endeavors. Depending on such reality and realization of the Eastern Africa region, the IGAD region, we took up the task with partners to develop a regional platform. So I'm speaking from an intergovernmental body consisting of 8 member states in the East Africa region. So I see quite a number of opportunities of having a regional roadmap, a regional framework that can bring in partners, but also governments towards anticipating disasters and towards acting in anticipation. I think that is why we embark on such endeavor. Just as a point of information, we are launching it next week also in COP, and all are invited this roadmap. This particular roadmap is actually targeted towards bringing the region, supporting the development partners and governments in the region to scale up anticipatory actions. There are a number of pilots already in each of the countries. The real question is how can we expand pilots, but also how can we scale it up to the region? How can we mainstream it in government operations, in their preparedness plans, in their response plans, and so on, as also alluded by the previous speaker. I think that is where the point lies. We need to harness the potentials of regional entities, intergovernmental bodies like IGAD, to bring together key actors. This particular roadmap in the region, I believe, would advance ultimately harmonization of approaches, how we implement the pilots, but also, critically or more technically, how we set thresholds and triggers. I would like to give an example here, Nicolas. For example, we have been expecting floods in August, actually. We knew that we are in the El Nino phase. But the real challenge is even anticipatory action is activated in Somalia, for example, which is the first of its kind, which is encouraging, of course. But the level of the floods and the amount of preparedness, the activation, is incomparable. By the way, I would like to also extend our appreciation to the European Commission, particularly the DG ECHO, who have extended about 7 million USD or euros to support Somalia, Kenya, and Ethiopia, which is quite important. But if such resources would be available, I would say, before the disaster, I think we could have averted those millions of displacements and also people affected. But I think we are also very much appreciative of such efforts, Nicholas. I'm trying to conclude by saying that, especially in trying to go from silos to synergies, the role of regional entities, the role of regional roadmaps on anticipatory action is quite central. Our plan, for example, next year is to develop a similar roadmap for each of the countries, which is aligned to the regional roadmap. So it is very clear. The activities are listed there. They are very clear, but in such a way that we can mainstream it in a government policies, for example. We have supported disaster risk management policies. Now, how can we bring in the element of anticipation? How can governments put finance? How can they pre-finance actions from whatever little they have? I think that is where more efforts need to be. In conclusion, Nicholas, I would like to just emphasize that we see great opportunity in transitioning towards anticipation than for Horn of Africa, for example, always moving in circles. It is 70, 80 years of crisis, humanitarian crisis. We believe that humanitarian needs can be substantially reduced if we act in anticipation, if we have proper actions in place, if we have advanced tools also to define thresholds with different hazard scenarios, and put some money from partners, from governments, so that we act in advance. I would like to agree that it is dignified. The return on investment is much higher and it's more sustainable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed, for this really great intervention and highlighting also the role of regional entities and regional roadmaps in enabling, supporting the scaling up of anticipatory action. And speaking on that note, CEPREDENAC is also a key player basically in the Central American region, and we have Claudia with us. And last month, basically, the Central American countries committed to promote a mainstream anticipatory action into national and government-led risk management strategy, and declared 2024 to be the year of anticipatory action. So really great progress also here. And I want to invite you to tell us a bit more about this declaration and what is really needed, the next steps to turn 2024 really into the year of anticipatory action.
Thank you very much. And it is very a unique opportunity to talk about what we have done in Central America. First of all, I'm Claudia Herrera. I'm the Executive Secretary of an intergovernmental organization. CEPREDENAC is the responsible between the SICA governments, the 7 countries that belongs to Central America, responsible for disaster risk management and climate change adaptation. We coordinate the activities of the national entities of disaster risk management and civil protection along the 7 countries, as I said before. Recently, we evoke the devastating moment that occurs after the Hurricane Mitch. And we decide to gather 2 important moments to promote a dialogue between the stakeholders that support the region. And we developed the forum 20 plus 5 years after the Hurricane Mitch, and also the 5th regional platform. And as Nicholas once mentioned, we have a declaration that right now is endorsed by the head of states, have just finished their head of state summit. And the good news is that they endorse this declaration that constitutes the roadmap and also constitute an unanimous commitment to develop more anticipatory actions. We are working very strong to move from the reactive way to work in our regions to anticipatory action. And we have a very good experiences that also Alexei was highlighting. For example, in Honduras, after Hurricane Eta and Iota, we managed to do a lot of evacuation program, and also to minimize the impacts at the most important thing to accomplish our main purpose, to save lives. In this declaration is the roadmaps that for the 5 next years, we are going to establish also a regional platform that is in the mandate of our comprehensive disaster risk management policy. that is also harmonized with the Sendai framework. We are trying to do more use advantage of the science and technology link with the youth, promoting also the early warning system and also early actions and different commitments that are a mandate for our state. That's the main important thing, this declaration and also the development of the regional plans constitute a sustainable plan for our following years. Also, I want to highlight that at the end of this year, will be finishing our updating process of the regional mechanism for humanitarian assistance. And in these mechanisms is also included the anticipatory action through a software that we are developing that engage all the countries, the humanitarian areas, the national systems that are involved in the response of an emergency. In this way, we are trying to engage all the levels. And the most important thing that I want to highlight is that we are engaging the global, the regional, national, but also putting a special focus on the main communities. As you know, we are a very highly vulnerable region. Our countries are affected every year by more recurrent and more intense disasters and hydrometeorological, geological, we are multi-threat scenarios. So these kind of actions are imperative for our country. So for us to bring these two events together and to have this declaration and to promote the 2024, the year of anticipatory action, is a very good opportunity. And also I want to highlight the importance of all the contribution that has been developed by the European Union, the early warning system, but also the approach with the communities that has been developed by ECHO, and the PECO project is one of the main resources or the main, ¿cómo se dice? Sorry, my English, the main, and also the jet lag. The main things that we have gathered in all these years working together with the European Union. And also I want to highlight that we are very excited to announce that we are going to develop a memorandum of understanding, not just with the Central America region. As I said before, the European Union is part of our DNA of the disaster risk reduction and preparedness of emergency response. But now, moving forward, working with Latin America and the Caribbean with the Intergovernmental Organization is a very good opportunity to interchange experiences, to strengthen our knowledge, and also to take advantage of Copernicus, that is going to be also a very good resource that will be helped a lot in our region. So we are very excited to be the champion of the 2024 in the region, and we are very committed. And as we know, we have to act now, but we have to act together. And the Memorandum of Understanding with the European Union and also the Global Dialogue Platform and the regional platform is a very good opportunity to collect and also to avoid the duplication and efforts and also the resources, and a very good opportunity to strengthen our capacities in emergency response, and also to save lives and to minimize the impact of the disaster in our regions. Thank you. Great.
Thank you very much, Claudia. So Central America, definitely a region to watch, particularly in the next TSC. I'm looking forward to developments going on there. Now the audience is basically also U-turn. You can again ask your question. I once again want to invite you to use Slido. Also to you, the online participant, ask your questions to the panelists. We do have around 10 minutes, so maybe 2-3 questions. And if you ask a question, ideally also tag or name the panelists so that I know whom I should this question direct to. I do have actually one question already that is to Alexei, to the Honduran Red Cross. You said basically, you mentioned in the EAP, could you tell us a bit more about the trigger? Did it materialize? What were the actions? How many people were reached? If you can just tell a bit more about the activation.
Yes, thank you. Look, the trigger is, as you know, is a combination of different things. The signals are there. Why are not used? And this is it could be a little tricky, huh? In terms of if it's raining but nothing happened, what about it's not raining but something happened? Because it's part of the model. So we design different kind of triggers in terms of the quantity of rain is falling down, how the level of the river is increasing, this kind of element. As I said in my previous intervention, the model is not perfect because we need to combine more elements on that. For example, the vulnerability and capacity analysis of the communities, how many people lives there, how many vulnerabilities has this kind of population in terms of chronic disease, how many children, how many women pregnancy, and etc. This kind of element at this moment is not included as a trigger, but is included as part of the response. You know, this is a trick combination. This is a good part in terms for the rain. But what about for in front of drought? I mean, if not it's raining, how people live in the same house, how the reserve of food they have in their houses. What about the malnutrition situation of the children? These kind of things could be a triggers also, but at this moment, we are not included as trigger. The model is alive. The model, we are learning from the application at this moment. And I say, if you permit me, a colleague of mine told me once, the brain is like the umbrella. If you don't open it, it's not work. I mean, it sounds better in Spanish, sorry. But it's true. I mean, we need to have the open mind just to test every single thing. As I said, the signal is around us. There are the signal. We can use it to make the decision, to save a life, to improve the life of condition of the population. Sorry.
Okay, great. So we've got one more question here. That is one of the barriers you've identified here is the fragmentation and lack of coordination of AA initiatives. How to incentivize AA stakeholders to work together? It's an interesting, for sure, tricky question. Maybe one of the regional bodies, maybe Ahmed, do you want to take this one? Or Claudia?
Nicolas, okay.
Ahmed, you want to come in
Yes,
here?
yes, Nicolas. I think, for example, one thing I forget to mention is also a regional roadmap. In addition to a regional roadmap, there is also a regional working group. A robust, strong regional working groups that brings together all anticipatory actions, I think provides an opportunity to, advance such synergies, such incentives. They address challenges, but also they explore opportunities together. So far, I think the secretariat of that working group are basically all partners who are implementing anticipatory actions as pilots. So I think such platforms can be supported to advance such a great opportunities of bringing all together, but also incentivizing each member, out of these discussions and collaborations, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. Then actually, I do have a second question. I think this is also to you, maybe Ahmed. Given the close link and cascading risks between climate and conflict, what are the opportunities to scale up anticipatory action in conflict or fragile settings? What are
Yes, Nicolas. At the moment, I think the major focus is on the climate, on the drought and floods. But the conflict parties also have been discussed. IGAD has a specialized center called CWARN, which is a conflict early warning center. So although it is not now straightforward, conflicts are not straightforward as drought or floods, I think something can be put together because we have that discussion earlier in order to address at least resource-based conflicts, which is common in the arid and semi-arid areas of the Eastern Africa region. But still, we are not yet there. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have one Another question actually for Joe Carlo is what legal amendments are needed to accommodate anticipatory action? If you can maybe elaborate a bit more on the current institutional work or the legal framework that you're currently working on.
Right, right. In the case of the Philippines, our main policy anchor on disaster risk reduction is Republic Act 10121. So it's the main disaster law of the Philippines. So there's a provision there that would grant National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Fund. So if you're going to look at there, so the government is mandated to allocate a certain amount for this funding, and 30% of which will be called the Quick Response Fund. So this Quick Response Fund would be ideally used in the case for immediate relief and response activities. However, the existing policy mechanism for the government to access this 30% Quick Response Fund is for the government through the president or the local government chief executive to declare a state of calamity. And per practice right now in the Philippines, this declaration of state of calamity is by nature post-disaster, right? So how are we going to now embed or to link anticipatory action, which is actually an intervention that should be done prior the disaster events or prior the impact of any hazard, right? So currently, we are somehow prevented, or we are limited on using the existing or the 70% allocation, which is by nature subjected to strict accounting rules and regulations. The point is, or to just sum it up, it is not easily accessible. So during activation of anticipatory action, how would you immediately disburse funds for example, for cash grants or for a simple funding of a logistics operation? How would you fund how would you pay the tracking services for prepositioning of goods? How would you pay for the any circumstantial funding needs during activation of AA? And of course, how would you fund, just for example, cash grants? No? So it is not easily accessible without the declaration. So now we are proposing to have a amendment to a policy that would allow the local government units to source out funds even before disaster, because currently the Philippines is only somehow limited on the existing resources that they have prior to impact of disaster. Like for example, the Philippines is the certain local government unit have already propositioned foods or relief items. This certain local government unit has already an established evacuation center. So prior to the instance of a disaster event or the hazard, they are only limited to what they have. So it is not really sustainable on the long-term basis, especially now that the ever-increasing intensities of hazards. So that's it. The end goal there is that we should have a dedicated funding that is readily accessible or easily accessible even prior to disasters. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I've got one last question, which is actually a perfect transition to the next panel, which is, where should this funding come from? That's actually the question we're going to take up now in this second panel. And at this stage, I want to thank you actually here on stage for joining me. Many thanks, Michael, Alexei, Giancarlo, Claudia. And big applause for them. Yeah, thank you. And I will invite our second panel here on stage. And meanwhile, while we get this new panel wired, you will have the opportunity to see another video on activation and how anticipatory action looks like in practice. This video comes from DJ Echo-supported FAO project. If you can just play it, restart here in 5 minutes and with a new panel. And if you can get the video up.
Mợ lục sao lục, mợ lục vừa rồi mà lấy đi một dao ní đó. chứ nếu nữa mà làm rắn đấy việc của đáy quá thấp đi, giờ đo dáng nó thì mới xả thôi, cho nên đánh có đo xong một phát là có như ngấm rồi cưới là mấy ngày rồi da ra rồi chứ cưới vẫn ngấm nữa, xấu lắm.
From the early warning signs, it became clear that Typhoon Noru was on its way to Vietnam. We started the preparation 5 days ahead. 48 hours before the landfall, we delivered unconditional cash and watertight drums to 600 vulnerable households in Quảng Trị and Thừa Thiên Huế provinces to protect their lives and livelihoods. How did we do this? First of all, coordination with government partners was key to designing anticipatory actions that align with the existing disaster risk management efforts. But we did not stop there. By consulting with the at-risk communities, we were able to tailor our assistance to the local needs. Then, we put our plans to the test. We simulated the deliveries of support to ensure that they work and that we could coordinate and operate effectively in anticipation of a typhoon. The valuable learnings from the simulation exercise help us better prepare and implement the anticipatory actions ahead of Typhoon Noru.
Ai cũng mừng hết, trong riêng chỉ một mình tôi, ai mà nhận được cái nó cũng mừng lắm, mừng là ra cho là quá chủ đạo, cho rí để có cái tiền đi mà mua những thực phẩm ăn, lụt bão, mua mì tôm, nói chung mua hết luôn, chỉ có trưa lại mua cho em luôn sữa thôi. Tôi lên cái quán tôi mua hết, tôi nợ lên, rí là quá mừng rồi, chứ về là bỏ vào trong cái thùng đó, và đẩy lại là khỏi hư hao chi bất kỳ miền ăn.
Cô nhận qua hỗ trợ phao là một cái thùng với 1 triệu tiền. Là cô sử dụng trong cái thùng là cô dùng đựng là các cái lương thực, ví dụ như mì gói, rồi là các lương thực khô với áo quần với sách vở của các cháu. Còn số tiền là cô cũng là dùng mua một ít mì gói với là mua thép rồi để mà buộc chặt nhà cửa.
Đợt mưa bão xảy ra là cái thùng là để đựng thức ăn. Là còn bạc tiền thì cũng mua thêm mà chuẩn bị thức ăn bão lụt đó. Nhận được hỗ trợ thì cực khổ lắm chú ơi.
Và trong thời gian tới thì trên cái kết quả đạt được này, chúng ta sẽ hoàn thiện lại quy trình và tổ chức tập huấn phổ biến, tuyên truyền cho các cái địa phương khác để làm sao mà khi mà có tình huống thiên tai xảy ra thì chúng ta kích hoạt sớm, căn cứ vào trên cái dự báo thì chúng ta sẽ kích hoạt sớm và có thể nhân rộng ra các loại hình thiên tai khác, không chỉ là do bão hay ngập lụt, và có các loại hình thiên tai khác như sạt lở đất, lũ quét này, hay là dông lốc, hay là những cái loại hình lũ lụt khác do cái thiên tai khác.
Great. So welcome back, dear online participants and also participants here in the room for a fantastic second panel. I'm now joined by Mrs. Sinead Ward. She's a transitional committee member of for developed countries, the climate director of the Department of Foreign Affairs in Ireland. Mrs. Ines Perez Martinez. She's advisor with the Global Shield Secretariat. And Mrs. Hannah Jans, director for Prevention and Preparedness at DG ECHO. Welcome here on stage. And together now in this panel, we will seek to outline opportunities where and how climate and development actors can help to scale up anticipatory action. there is also, again, for you, dear participants, the opportunity to ask questions, and please do so. Please join Slido, ask your question, or vote the question you'd like me to ask the panelists. Ideally, address also panelists so that I know whom to address. And I will now take the privilege and ask the first question. And to you, Ines. So the Global Shield was launched last year, building on a joint effort by the G7 and the V20, and its purpose is, I quote, to increase protection for poor and vulnerable people by providing and facilitating substantially more and better pre-arranged finance against disasters. Can you tell us a bit more how the Shield can also help to scale up anticipatory action?
I will try. Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you again for having me here. It's really an honor to be able to participate in this panel and talk a little bit about the Global Shield. It's interesting in linking to one of the challenges and barriers that was mentioned by the previous panelists. They mentioned regulatory framework and lack of funding. And as you know, prearranged finance can allow for quick and timely distribution of funds right after an event occurs, but sometimes also before an event takes place, or a disaster, I mean, which is the case for forecast-based financing solutions. And this is where we think that the Global Shield could actually connect really well with anticipatory action. To provide a little bit of context on how the Global Shield works, currently we're working in 8 Pathfinder countries and 1 Pathfinder region. And the idea is that each country undergoes an in-country process, which is an inclusive consultation process where we try to identify what is happening in the country within the climate and disaster risk financing space, what programs are active, the regulatory framework that is in place, etc. We also support the country with identifying what the risks and vulnerabilities are. And with this information, with this evidence, the country then provides a request for CDRFI support to the Global Shield Secretariat, to which the Global Shield financing structure then comes back with a tailored solutions package to deal with those needs expressed by the country. So we see that the Global Shield could support anticipatory action in 2 main ways. First of all, could be raising awareness of the different initiatives of anticipatory action in the countries. One way to do this is to perhaps provide a briefing note on anticipatory action and its connection to CDRFI during the in-country process. Another way would be to get anticipatory action actors involved as well in the in-country process so that we can ensure that the initiatives and activities that are happening in the country or in the region also are integrated in the stock take that we take. There could be the possibility of including a chapter on anticipatory action in the gap analysis that is also produced. So there are certain elements that we can try to incorporate in a way that enables government officials and the different relevant actors in the country to be aware of what is happening in the anticipatory action space and how it can connect with the Global Shield work. And the second way would be through the implementation phase. And this perhaps I can provide an example. So depending on the needs expressed by the country, if it's one of the priorities or the country is maybe either by a problem statement by the country in the country request for CDRFI support, or maybe even the country requesting support for anticipatory action as it relates to forecast-based financing, for example, the Global Shield could finance the design or development of forecast-based finance products that could then deliver payouts before the disaster takes place, which could then fund anticipatory action measures. But it can also provide premium support to such products, because we also know that one of the main barriers can be the high costs for premiums. And I also wanted to flag, because I saw there was a colleague in the panel.
Maybe we get to that back in a second in the
Sounds
Q&A.
good.
Thanks very much. So different opportunities to engage in the Shield, take in the process in the country, in the stock taking process, but also in the implementation phase, also for the building of the relevant system for anticipatory action. Sounds good to me. Mr. Walsh, what role do you see for anticipatory action in the current loss and damage discussion? The Anticipation Hub also just published a call to action ahead of this COP, where it advocates to make anticipatory action also eligible as part of comprehensive approaches under the Loss and Damage Fund and scale-up funding arrangement. And I'd be keen also to you, since we do have this fund now, which is, I think, amazing news. What's your take on this, and what space there is? And if we can get the call to action on the slide, it would be fantastic. Over to you.
So much. Yes, this is working. Happy to be here, and I'm glad that Ines already spoke, because then I can say that Ireland has just given 10 million to the Global Shield. So it's part of where the money comes from, a question that you raised earlier. So yes, we had a long and somewhat torturous transitional committee process, which has thankfully resulted in an agreement. And I think, I can reflect a little bit on how the humanitarian actors have engaged so far, which I think will help to see how they should engage henceforth. I think the engagement has been pretty good of the humanitarian actors. I think the reason that it's been good, and I would suggest that they continue in this regard, is that I think it's been quite specific. And I will say that as transitional committee members, we've had a huge amount of input come to us from all sorts of civil society and UN and all sorts of actors. And some of it, frankly, was not that useful because it was at the level of principles. And we were really negotiating details and commas and very specific clauses. And for civil society and others to really be useful and to influence us, they also had to really engage in the specifics, because there was no point in just saying, we want you to, we want you to be, sort of having a fund that serves communities. Obviously, that's also what we want, right? So like how, right? The critical question for us on the transitional committee was how to put all these principles that I think all of us share into practice. And so I would say any actors that want to really influence what will now be the board of the Loss and Damage Fund, which I think we'll probably start talking about at this COP, happily. I think they need to really invest in understanding how the fund is developing, and we do have observer seats on the board and all that kind of thing. But I would say it is an investment. There's no point just putting up communiques saying we want we want the fund to be doing all these wonderful things, because we all want that. But how to actually do it is where the specific recommendations and the experience of the humanitarian actors can really be specific. The second thing I would say, and it's a bit of a warning maybe, is that actually these UNFCCC processes are extremely time-consuming and intensive, and I don't actually think it's worth everybody's time. I think humanitarian actors need to be very selective on what they join, because coming back to my first point, if you want to do it properly, you need to really invest and you need to really understand whether it's the Loss and Damage Fund or the Green Climate Fund or whatever process you're trying to influence. So if you really want to do it properly, you have to invest. So you really should make a decision as to whether you really think this is a key part of your, this is something you really think will have impact. And I think that means humanitarian actors also talking to each other and dividing out the roles and say, okay, well, look, we'll focus on something else. You focus on the Loss and Damage Fund. You focus on, other aspects. So we did try to give some guidance in the Transitional Committee recommendations on, funding arrangements and how they can be coordinated. So I think there will be that coordination hub as well. And then influencing the fund itself will be a question of engaging with the board. So I would say, reflect a bit. Is this really something that that you want to do as a sector, who's best placed to do it, and then really invest and do it properly would be my advice.
Thank you very much for this really a very practical, very useful recommendation. So really invest time and resources, be selective, and decide who will do what. Many thanks. Hannah, or DJ Ecker's humanitarian donor that has been investing for anticipatory action for some time now. How do you think the different sectors can work together to help scaling up? What role do you see there?
No, absolutely. I strongly believe. I think that we are all converted here, and we are the AA ambassadors, or whatever you would like to call us. And it has been really an enriching discussion for me as well, as I am quite new to this topic. But still, it's all very right and straightforward, right? We are talking about something that is to be done before the disaster strikes, to prevent or to reduce. And it seems so obvious to do, yet so very few people understand that. So I think that this is a unique crowd that needs to be spread with this, gospel somewhere. So also to other communities, and this is where I want to say a few words indeed. I don't know whether we have put any money to a Global Shield. I'm sorry, I cannot say that right now. I'm sure we did. But we did have supported more than 30 projects, 50 million worth, for last 3 years that are dedicated to anticipatory action related measures. We do a lot of pilots in order actually to provide methodologies and ways to tackle these constraints that have been mentioned before in a previous panel. So we do a lot of we do a work specifically on crisis modifiers, how to use them, the flexibility to provide of pre-arranged financing, which is so important if you indeed want to be providing support for communities that are in a forecasted area of a disaster. That's critical. We also do support forecast-based action, and that's something that you, Ines, also mentioned. There is a whole list of projects that actually support directly operation data, basically collection of data for those communities where the disaster strikes, so that we can better prepare the reaction, of course. We do that through a disaster resilience relief fund of IFRC. We also do projects that go directly into disaster preparedness. And this is specifically to the vulnerable communities, which are normally the ones that are most hit with the disasters and hazards. And last but not least, the latest pilot is with the Start Ready project. This is about scientific modeling component that is meant to predict location, frequency, and potential impact of specific disasters. And we have 9 countries we are piloting together with Start Ready, and we are very happy that we could support that. But this is purely anticipatory actions. And what I want to say is that we also very much advocate for investments in disaster risk reduction and early warning systems. This is especially in the development policy world. We support and advocate for meteorological agencies funding. Without forecasts of those, anticipatory action would not work. We also support very much institutionalization of anticipatory actions. That's something that many of you mentioned, and there were projects mentioned that we support. So yes, we absolutely feel that this is a nexus. Michael mentioned this word in his intro. This is a nexus case. And even for European Union, it is difficult to move from this exposed, situation into ex ante. Yet we will keep trying, and I think that that, as I said in the beginning, the ambassadors of anticipatory actions are key to spread the good word about this action.
Fantastic. Now, again, I want to involve you, or invite you, dear participants here in the room and also online, to ask questions to our fantastic panel using Slido. I do have one question here already. I think it's probably directed to you, Hannah. It's one of the benefits of anticipatory action is pooling fund and risks across country to stretch funds further. How does this align with donor preferences to fund specific countries?
I don't think that we actually support very much regional organizations. I mean, we had examples from Central and Latin America. We try to think that our concept, or we try to sell our concept or advocate for our concept, because disasters know no borders. So it's clear. You cannot, we may have preferential countries we deal with because of some vulnerable communities that live there. But there, again, we actually have a policy of going cross-border. We try not to concentrate on countries.
Okay. Then, actually, I do have a personal question now. It's I mean, we talked about the complementarity. It's a big topic in all the discussions, and I was, again, I'd be really keen also to hear maybe from you, Sinead, how can we also ensure the complementarity between the different funding streams, the different funds that exist there, also from climate and development side? It's a tricky task, and just keen to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I do worry a little bit about this, actually, because I actually think the humanitarian sector is pretty well coordinated. I know we can always say so many things, but when you compare it to other parts of the broader kind of development humanitarian spectrum, I think we've seen huge progress in the last probably kind of like almost 30 years now, since sort of Rwanda and those kind of crises sort of really brought that need into focus. Where I would be a bit more concerned is in kind of climate programs that are starting, that are kind of almost working outside any sort of development and humanitarian sphere. And I think actually this very event that we're at now can sometimes be a little bit a culprit of that, in the sense that, you know, many of us are increasing our climate finance very rapidly. I can tell you Ireland is doubling climate finance in 3.5 years. It's very challenging. It's great, of course, we're happy. It's very challenging to do that well. Our approach is that we're doing that entirely within our existing development humanitarian infrastructure, where we know how to work. And we know what the needs are. Our focus is almost entirely adaptation and least developed countries and small island developing states. So we're doing our climate finance within that sphere. But there's different structures in different countries, and I do worry sometimes that we're setting up climate programs almost as though in developing countries, almost as though, you know, we haven't spent the last 85 years implementing and failing and learning lessons from development humanitarian programming. So I think we need to be really careful here to bring climate programs into the fold. And then I think for like loss and damage, like we were just talking about, we do have a proposal. Let's see how it goes within the text that was agreed the other day, whenever that was, on the 30th. You know, I think let's see how that goes in terms of trying to, you know, and we struggled a lot with this on the transitional committee. Like, you know, we don't want to add yet another coordination mechanism that people have to go to, but at the same time trying to recognize that, you know, climate is such a big part now of so many humanitarian responses. So how do we sort of pull together that forum? So we sort of suggest a kind of a not very regular but quite high-level coordination forum on loss and damage. And I think we need to see. I think we need to see how that works. So for me, the concern is mostly how to bring climate, development, humanitarian closer together because they're so interlinked. Yeah.
I've got one short question that just came in. Do you interpret the language of the TC recommendation of the fund as potentially also including anticipatory action or just the funding arrangement?
I think it could be both. We don't have a hugely, as many of you will have noted, we don't have a hugely specific scope in the fund. So the fund actually is not extremely tight at the moment in terms of saying, oh, it can't focus on this, it can't focus on that. Frankly, we couldn't agree on a more specific scope, so we've kind of left it quite open. So I don't see why that wouldn't be the case. But again, we were very anxious on the committee to try to make sure that we didn't sort of promote the fund as essentially just duplicating the humanitarian sector. So, for example, would it make sense for the fund to be funding, sort of essentially humanitarian relief activities? I would say no, it wouldn't. But this is debatable. And again, I think it comes back to the first point that I made, which is how is the humanitarian sector going to engage in the operations of the fund to make sure that, as well as the overall coordination mechanism, which, as I said, is not super regular, but the board will be kind of the ongoing body making the decisions for the fund, and how is the humanitarian sector going to try and influence the board so that we don't see that kind of duplication.
Great. Many thanks, in fact, to all of you for joining me here on the panel, and also to you, the online participants and participants here in the room, for such an active engagement. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I'd love to continue the conversation. I hope we can do so maybe outside. There are a couple of key takeaways for me that I took also from the first panel, that we need greater support for mainstreaming, anticipatory action, international disaster risk management framework, greater investment in local capacities, also fund anticipatory action at greater scale, and also engage in the climate process, also selectively and strategically. So again, many thanks for joining me, and with that, I say goodbye. Thanks.